In the annals of modern boxing, few fighters have carved a legacy as fearsome and emphatic as Naoya Inoue. Known to many as the Monster, Inoue has become synonymous with explosive power, technical mastery, and an unshakable will. But among all the tales of his brutality in the ring, one episode stands out as a definitive chapter in his rise to global stardom: his run in the World Boxing Super Series, where disrespect crossed a sacred line, and vengeance was served not with words, but with fists. It was in this chapter that an incident involving his father lit a fire inside Inoue that would ultimately scorch an undefeated opponent's record and spirit. Back in 2017, Naoya Inoue had already cemented his reputation as one of boxing's most lethal punchers. Having moved up from junior bantamweight, he set his sights on capturing a second world title in the bantamweight division. The World Boxing Super Series, WBSS, presented the perfect battleground, a tournament that promised not only another belt but prestige, glory, and a shot at the famed Muhammad Ali trophy. Inoue entered the competition with ruthless intentions, and from his very first bout it was clear he wasn't there to make friends. His opening bout in the WBSS quarterfinals ended in emphatic fashion, an electrifying first-round knockout that sent a resounding message to the rest of the competitors. Inoue didn't just defeat his opponent, he dismantled him. The flurry of punches was so clinical and explosive that it drew audible gasps from spectators and analysts alike. Suddenly, every fighter in the bracket had a new reason to feel nervous. Inoue wasn't just in this tournament, he was storming through it like a force of nature. However, what followed in the semifinals was not merely a boxing contest. It became something deeply personal. Inoue's next opponent was Puerto Rico's Emmanuel "Manny" Rodriguez, an undefeated IBF champion with a strong chin, fast hands, and the confidence of a fighter who had never kissed the canvas. Rodriguez at the time carried an aura of defiance, believing he could neutralize the Japanese phenom with discipline and toughness. But it wasn't Rodriguez's bravado that made this matchup infamous. It was an act of blatant disrespect during the pre-fight build-up that turned a professional contest into a mission for retribution. At the open workouts just days before the fight, Rodriguez's coach, an imposing figure with face tattoos and an aggressive demeanor, did something no one in Inoue's camp expected. In a moment captured by cameras and etched in the minds of those present, he aggressively shoved Shingo Inoue, Naoya's coach and father. The moment was brief, but unforgettable. Shingo, a calm and composed man who had guided his son from his earliest days in the gym, stood his ground. But the gesture did not go unnoticed. Naoya Inoue, standing nearby, didn't react emotionally in the moment. His arms were crossed, his face unreadable. But beneath that stoic exterior, something had ignited. Shingo would later describe the act as profoundly ungentlemanly, a clear violation of the mutual respect that defines boxing, no matter how intense the rivalry. The fight for Naoya had now transcended the belts and the Ali trophy. It had become a matter of honor. 3 days later, during the official face-offs, the shift in Inoue's demeanor was visible to anyone paying close attention. Gone was the calm air of professionalism. In its place was a cold intensity. His eyes locked onto Rodriguez with silent fury. The air between the two fighters was thick with tension, but only one man truly understood what was about to unfold. While Rodriguez carried his undefeated record like a shield, Inoue held a vendetta sharpened by the disgrace shown toward his father. The stakes were monumental. The winner would walk away with both the WBA and IBF bantamweight titles and a guaranteed slot in the WBSS final. The loser would leave with broken dreams and, as it turned out, much more. On May 18, 2019, in Glasgow, Scotland, the two undefeated champions entered the ring. The crowd buzzed with anticipation. To many, this was the true final. Both men were elite. Both had walked through past opponents with ease, but the difference that night was invisible to the crowd. Only Inoue knew what was about to happen, and Rodriguez had no clue he was about to pay for sins that weren't entirely his own. The opening bell rang, and Rodriguez came out aggressive. He pressed forward, confident and composed. This was the same strategy that had brought him success in the past. Apply pressure, dictate pace, and outbox. But against Inoue, this tactic proved suicidal. The monster stood like a coiled spring, studying his opponent's movements with the precision of an assassin. Every jab, every feint was data. Inoue was calculating the moment to unleash the storm. Midway, through the first round, Rodriguez found himself in exchanges he couldn't control. Naoya's left hook smudged the edges of his consciousness. Body shots sank into his ribs like blades. The first round turned into a brutal test of Rodriguez's chin and heart. He survived, but just barely. It was clear to anyone watching, Rodriguez had felt something different that night. Something monstrous. But Rodriguez, to his credit, walked back to his corner with his head held high. He believed the worst was over. He had tasted Inoue's best, and he was still standing. In his mind, he had passed the test. Unfortunately for him, Inoue hadn't even opened the full playbook yet. In the opposite corner, Shingo Inoue gave his son a short but impactful instruction: start throwing the left hook more often. It was time to dismantle, not just dominate. The second round began, and Rodriguez came out again, pushing forward. He tried to box, to trade, to show the same confidence that had brought him success. But Naoya Inoue was no longer interested in reading data. He had all the information he needed. The execution had begun. Just seconds into the round, Inoue launched a left hook that detonated on Rodriguez's jaw like a landmine. For the first time in his professional career, Rodriguez hit the canvas. The arena erupted. The undefeated Puerto Rican was stunned, physically and emotionally. He got up, but the cracks in his armor had appeared. As the referee resumed the fight, Inoue went in for the kill. This wasn't just about victory. This was about respect, about dignity. Inoue pressed forward and unleashed a perfect liver shot in the corner. The punch seemed to suck the life out of Rodriguez. He crumpled again, gasping in pain. He got up a second time, but his body was beginning to betray him. Moments later, Inoue landed another left hook. This one sealed the deal. Rodriguez went down for a third time and could not beat the count. The fight was over. In less than 6 minutes of total action, Naoya Inoue had taken a proud, undefeated champion and reduced him to rubble. It was violent. It was surgical. It was personal. After the fight, Inoue acknowledged what many had suspected, that the incident involving his father had served as powerful motivation. Rodriguez's coach had disrespected Shingo, and the fighter paid the price. Despite the carnage, Inoue showed respect to Rodriguez afterward, honoring him as a warrior. But the message was clear. No one lays hands on family and walks away unscathed. With that win, Inoue had unified the WBA and IBF titles and punched his ticket to the final of the World Boxing Super Series. Waiting for him in the final was none other than the Filipino legend, Nonito Donaire. A future Hall of Famer, Donaire was no stranger to world titles and brutal wars inside the ring. The anticipation for the matchup was electric. It was experience versus youth, power versus technique, legacy versus ascension. The stare-down between the two before the fight was intense. Donaire, despite being older, exuded confidence. Inoue, ever composed, stared right back. The ring in Saitama, Japan, would witness one of the most iconic fights in recent boxing memory. From the first bell, the bout lived up to its billing. Donaire didn't come to survive. He came to win. He threw thunderous counters, landed crisp shots, and pushed Inoue in ways few had before. In the early rounds, Donaire landed a right hand that broke Inoue's orbital bone. The injury was severe, and for the first time in his career, Inoue was visibly rocked. Blood flowed from his nose. His eyes swelled rapidly. But even then, his instincts never betrayed him. In the very moment of pain, he slipped a follow-up left hook and countered with venom. What followed was a war of attrition. Each round, the fighters traded momentum. Donaire's experience shone. Inoue's youth and ferocity roared back. The damage mounted. But neither man took a backward step. Then came round 11. Inoue, having weathered Donaire's storm, found an opening and delivered one of the most devastating body shots in modern boxing history. A perfectly placed left hook to the liver sent Donaire crumbling to the canvas. The Filipino Flash writhed in agony, his face contorted. But somehow he made the count. The final round was a blur of desperation, heart, and grit. The bell rang, after 12 brutal rounds. Inoue had his hand raised in a unanimous decision victory, but both men were embraced by the boxing world. After the fight, Inoue confirmed the extent of his injuries: a broken orbital bone, a broken nose, and severe swelling. Yet he had fought through it all. Donaire became one of the few men to go the distance with the monster and earned Inoue's eternal respect. But that wasn't the end. 3 years later, the rematch was set. Donaire, rejuvenated and hungrier than ever, believed he had deciphered the code to defeat Inoue. In interviews, he spoke confidently about the lessons of the first fight, about how he believed Inoue's pressure opened him up for counters. But what Donaire didn't know was that Inoue wasn't the same fighter he faced in 2019. He had grown sharper, faster, and even more dangerous. The rematch opened with Donaire, attempting to re-establish the same rhythm he had found in their first encounter. But it didn't work. Inoue's jabs were crisper, his footwork smoother, and his counters deadlier. Late in the first round, Inoue landed a right hand to the temple that sat Donaire down instantly. It wasn't a dramatic knockout, but a signal. The tables had turned. The second round was a massacre. Inoue's left hooks and overhand rights found Donaire's head repeatedly. A relentless barrage cornered the veteran and left the referee with no choice but to wave it off. In just 2 rounds, the man who had once pushed Inoue to his limit was broken. The rivalry ended not in bitter words but in mutual respect. Donaire embraced Inoue. There were no excuses, just admiration, and for Inoue, it was closure. He had avenged the pain of their first war, not because of animosity but because of the evolution he had undergone since then. The monster had not only solidified his place at the top of the bantamweight division, he had reminded the world why he's one of the most feared fighters on the planet. When Naoya Inoue fights, it's not just boxing, it's a spectacle, and for those who dare cross him or those he holds dear, it can be a reckoning.